Welcome to Voices of the Vigilant, where we dive deep into the human side of tech. Here, we go beyond the ones and zeros to explore the people, passions, and stories driving the cyber and internet security world. In each episode, we bring together experts, rebels, and innovators from across the tech industry to share their personal journeys, challenges, and victories. And here's your host and rebel in charge at Vigilant Violet, Jess Vachon.
Hey, welcome back to Voices of the Vigilant, the podcast where we go beyond the tools and the tactics and get into the people, the philosophy, and the paths that are actually shaping cybersecurity. I'm very excited about today's guest because every now and then you meet someone in the industry who is living proof that there is no single road into it, and that the roads you wouldn't expect are often the ones that produce the most interesting practitioners. My guest today has led travelers through some of the most remote corners of the world as an adventure travel guide. She earned her MBA. She built security programs inside a fast-moving SaaS startup. And now she's the vice president of cyber services at ANV Cyber, where she's helping policyholders actually use their cyber insurance relationships to reduce risk. Hey, that's a great idea. Not just survive an incident. 3 pivots in, and every single one of them made her sharper. This is Courtney Hans. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great that we could connect. We were talking briefly before we went live, and you were out, I think, this weekend doing some hiking. Is that true?
That's right. Yeah, I just went out with my husband and a couple of really good friends to attempt a summit of Mount Shasta in Northern California. So some of us summited, some of us didn't, but that's mountaineering. And it was a really incredible trip, gorgeous weather, reminded me that, consideration of risk exists in all walks of life, not just cybersecurity. Had a great chat with a 23-year-old guide who was phenomenal, by the way. Quick shout out to Shasta Mountain Guides, who was talking about risk consideration as we were traveling up and down a fairly sketchy part of the route. And, the risk versus reward conversation, likelihood of, incidents happening. And I was like, yep, that's my day to day. So glad to be doing this on the weekend too, but it was a fantastic trip. And like I shared, I'm a little bit, shall we say, sun-kissed from that adventure up on the snow in the high altitudes.
That's awesome. All right. So let's jump right in. The career arc, very interesting. Because when I read your background, I genuinely did a double take: adventure travel guide, then MBA, then product strategy, and now you're a VP.
Yeah.
Walk me through how those dots connect.
Sure. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of the career pivot or building the career pyramid. And I will talk to anybody about this, especially folks that are considering a switch into cybersecurity or really any field. But I started out of college and got a job because I had studied abroad in Italy and spoke conversational Italian. It's really rusty now, but spoke conversational Italian. And through a friend, discovered a company called Backroads Active Travel. They're still in business, still amazing. They were looking for guides to lead all over the world. One of the areas they were looking for was people who spoke Italian could lead trips over there. And so that's how I found out about it and interviewed and started. That was, I wouldn't even say the year because it'll date me a bit, but started that way back out of college and spent the next 9-10 years just traveling the world. I had the best flip-flop tan because I was chasing the perpetual summer. But it really was just, me, this 22-year-old kid out of college. They hand you the keys to the van and a company credit card and they say, go be our brand in the field, go lead these, very type A, super fun, type A accomplished individuals on these incredible adventures, hiking, biking, like I said, all over the States, all over different parts of the world. And it was phenomenal. You really have to think on your feet. You really, hindsight's 2020, right? Like you can connect all the dots when you look backwards pretty easily, but it prepared me in ways I couldn't possibly have fathomed at the time. Not just for, later career years, but certainly for the cybersecurity field, right? Being able to take in a lot of information. Anytime you went to a new destination, you really had to study up, get your, what we called KOA, knowledge of the area, up to par so that you could answer. This was, again, I'm a little bit on the older side. So this was before the eras of smartphones. So if a guest asked you a question about, what's that plant over there? Or why do they paint their doors a certain color or whatever? you had to, either know it or very charmingly say, well, let's discover that together. And so you really just had to amass a bunch of information and then find your niche. Like I used to guide trips in Yosemite, and there's so many interesting things to talk about Yosemite, from, natural history, cultural history, just flora, fauna, etc. And I would just go deep into the geology of the area because I found that particularly fascinating. So if they asked me a question about trees, that I can very easily pivot, like, oh yeah, that's we see that up here, but you notice it's perched on this type of rock. Pivot to an area that I knew a little bit more about. But it was incredible. You had to not only just know your stuff, but know who you're speaking to, right? Which we know is so very important in the cybersecurity field. You have to know how to resonate with your audience and connect with them and connect with their concerns. And that was something that I learned right off the bat. And also being able to listen, because we would start these trips with, intros and an overview of the trip. And we would always ask, what brought you on this trip? Why this trip? Why now? Are you particularly interested? Again, I would lead a lot of trips in the California wine country, rough gig, right? So I'd ask, are you really interested in wine? Are you really interested in biking? Did this, the dates of this trip line up? What brought you here? And what are you most looking forward to out of this trip? And by leading with that, then, I would tell the guests, tell me what you're looking for now, because as much as we value the feedback post-trip and we want to hear what we did well, what we could improve upon, if you tell us what you're looking for now, what's missing now, what's not hitting, we can make it better now, right? So just living in the moment and making sure that you're checking in with folks and understanding where they're at, what they're looking for, what they're missing. Again, really critical skill that helped. And so after 10 years of that, and again, national parks, the Natchez Trace in Mississippi, Italy, New Zealand, Norway, Vietnam, all sorts of very, very cool places. And like I said, many pairs of flip-flops later, I decided, okay, I think maybe I'm ready to not travel all the time. I would like maybe a plant or a pet or a partner. And so it's like, all right, let's think about what's next. And I realized I have a lot of really transferable skills for, quote unquote, normal job, but I'm not sure if I know how best to translate them to someone who's not familiar with this world. And so that led me to start considering getting my MBA. So I went back, and I'm a WC. I went to UC Berkeley for undergrad, English major. So I speak English every day. Look at me out here using my major. And then went to UC Davis, go Aggies, for my MBA. And that really helped me put the right vocabulary to things. And I had really different experience coming into that program than a lot of the folks in my cohort. But again, it was a smaller program, maybe like 65 folks or so, really supportive, and really cool, diverse background. So we all brought a lot of strength to each other and to the program. And that, again, that helped me both get the vocabulary to translate those experiences. And also, I suppose, street cred's not the right word, but I guess academic cred for the business world, so to speak. And then I went right back into experiential products, really. I went into the wine industry. Again, like just pulling on my experience of guiding cycling trips around the wine country and learning how to connect people with wine and the stories behind wine. And then went to work for REI. That's what brought me up here to the Pacific Northwest. I went to work for the headquarters of REI, and they're in their adventure travel program. And I got to be more on the operational side. But because I had been a guide for so long, I was really able to connect with those field operators that we worked with and understand, how to marry their needs and their strengths with what our guests were looking for. So yeah, you're just getting the whole verbal vomit on my career past here, but spent 7 or 8 years at REI in that role and a couple of others, managing a team of customer service specialists who were phenomenal, who were so dedicated to making sure that people felt comfortable and prepared for these experiences that might be a little bit outside their comfort zone. Like we were helping people get ready for their first backpacking trip ever, or their first international trip possibly. And so they had a lot of questions, and we did our best to answer them. And again, make sure that they felt really comfortable in their preparation, whether that was their fitness and their training to their packing, You'd be surprised at how many questions we got about which hotel rooms had hair dryers, or, just how steep is the grade on that climb for day 2 of that backpacking trip. People get really specific in their ask, but, people have a fear of the unknown. So we tried to help them around that. And out of that role, I moved into a role that was probably one of my favorite pieces of work to date, working on really like a 2-3 person team that was entrepreneurial at the co-op. We called ourselves the tender off the cruise ship because REI is a large organization, can take some time to, pivot and try new things. But the 3 of us working together were like, let's just try this. Let's try a small format shop in a climbing gym. Let's try a boathouse. Let's look at what it would look like to develop campgrounds, because REI, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with the co-op, but they were first chartered to help people solve the problem of getting quality gear at affordable prices. And that's not so much a problem in the outdoor industry anymore. There's a million retailers, there's Amazon, it's pretty easy to find the gear that you're looking for. REI still does a great job of that, but that's not their members' primary concern or need. And so we started talking about what are some of the hindrances to people getting outdoors right now? Is it, access? Is it knowledge? Is it, space? Do they want to be a boater, but they don't have space to store a kayak? So we started looking at that and re-envisioning what REI's future path could be like. And so in that world, I got to prepare, dig deep into my MBA roots and prepare P&Ls and build out a business case and pitch to the C-suite at this large organization and get them to adopt our vision of the future. So again, like all the dots connecting up, when we talk about in cybersecurity now, being able to speak to the board, being able to speak to the C-suite, being comfortable and confident in talking about your ideas and pulling forward, those guiding conversations where I had to really, again, my 22, 23-year-old self, making these, high-powered individuals think that my idea was their idea. That's a skill, right? And so I use that at REI, building consensus, building support for my ideas. And I bring that forward into the work I do in cybersecurity as well. So now my third major career pivot in 2020, we all lived through that. We know what that was like. And REI had quite the workforce reduction. I was in a different role at the time, and that role got eliminated. So that was my 4th career layoff. And to anyone that's listening, if you've ever been laid off, I'm sorry. And if you've been laid off multiple times, maybe you will agree with the sentiment that it gets a little bit easier. I don't wish a layoff on anyone, but subsequent ones, you start to be able to disassociate the personal part of it, right? Everyone says it's not personal. That's bullshit. You said I could swear, so I'll say it. That's bullshit. It feels personal. It's personal. It's your life. But with each subsequent layoff, you can remind yourself, I've been here before. I can climb out of this. I can do hard things, right? That's why I go mountaineering and remind myself I can do hard things. I can do this. This is not gonna set me back permanently. I can figure out what's next. And not to be super cheesy, but there's also the saying that, when one door closes, another one opens. And for me, fortunately, every time I've been laid off, again, 4 times, because I tend to work at startups or, entrepreneurial work, I found myself in a better situation with a role that better aligned what I wanted to do with my values, my goals, etc. So in this case, that layoff in 2020, I ended up deciding to go to a boot camp and learn how to code. It's something I had dabbled in college and hadn't touched for a long time. And I thought, that sounds interesting, and what better time than now? So I signed on to go to a boot camp. Lovely, lovely folks, great program. At first, I was just going to do their quick intro because I was just looking for something to occupy my mind and not get spin up about being laid off in a pandemic. And I told my husband, I'm gonna do this. I think this is what I want to switch to. I want to, do this full 6-month program and go all in and figure this out. And so I got a lot of support there. And I had just finished the next part of the program when the same school launched a cyber program, a cybersecurity engineering program. And they were giving scholarships out because it was new, right? They wanted people to come and try it. And so I thought, well, free is free. I'll again, unemployed right now. I'll see if I can get myself a scholarship for that. And I did. And then because I loved programming so much, I really debated for a bit. I'm like, do I stick with the programming that I'm really liking? I'm paying for this program. Or do I go for the free one? And somebody asked me, well, what would you do if it wasn't free? I'm like, that's a valid question, but it is free. And that's a big consideration. So I chose to go into the cybersecurity engineering program. Thought, if I don't like it, there's nothing to say I can't go back into the programming side. But I loved it. 2 weeks in, I was like, I can see how I can bring some value here because I have such a strong understanding of business fundamentals, business objectives, and how to move through enterprise, how to move through startup. I had been at that point at a couple startups and a couple enterprise type organizations. So I can connect the dots here. I know I didn't come up through the technical side. So for example, studying for the CISSP, they always talk about it's hard for folks who have come up through the technical side to get into that management mindset and not just look at what is the best technical answer for a question. Because I didn't come up that way, that wasn't the lens I looked through, and that was really helpful for me. So anyway, I went through that program, and then as it turns out, as I was getting to the end, a good friend of mine, one of my best friends from high school, said, oh, my husband, he's at a startup right now. They need someone to do security. And I said, that's fantastic. He knows I'm like so green, right? I'm brand new at this. She goes, just talk to him. And so I did. And of course, I knew him. He was married to my best friend. And we chatted about 2 days after I finished my program. And I told him, listen, I'm brand new, right? He goes, yeah, I know, but I know I can trust you. I'm not concerned about that. And I was like, yeah, that's absolutely true. I'm very trustworthy. And we've known each other for a while. And he goes, at the beginning, it's going to be a lot about vendor management, really. I said, well, I've been doing vendor management for decades, so I feel pretty comfortable doing that. I told him, listen, the thing I'm the most nervous about is letting you down or damaging your reputation. If you bring in this newbie and they're like, what was he thinking bringing this gal in? I'm going to be really embarrassed for me, and I'm going to feel really bad for you guys. Don't worry about it. We'll bring you in as a contractor, and that way, if you start to feel uncomfortable or it's not working out, then it's easy to just part ways. No big deal. It's like, I love it. That's great. Like a little bit of an out. 2 weeks in, he's like, we got to get you full time. This is great. I love it. And I was like, I love it too. And so that's how I got in as the first security hire at a startup. With no, he didn't know much about security. He's very, very, very smart guy, very talented engineer, doesn't come from a security background, but is security minded. But that's to say I didn't have a security professional at that organization to mentor or, show me the ropes. So I really had to build my outside network board of advisors. And so that's what I did. And to this day, I talk about my special LinkedIn friend who is this great guy that I met during my program who I could reach out in those early days and like, Matt, what do you think? Should I do this or that? And have a good conversation. So between building my outside network of advisors and just getting to do all the things at a startup that, right? You wear 14 hats when you work at a startup, as you well know. You have to do all the things. I got so much incredible exposure and so much support. And again, because I didn't come up solely through a technical pathway, I was able to relate, not saying that people that come up through technical pathways can't do this too, but for me, I was able to relate with folks across the business. In finance, in HR, as we were building out the team, and make sure that they saw me as someone on the same side of the table as them that was trying to co-build with a security mindset. And I'm really proud of the security first culture we built there at CareOf, which was the startup, because people felt like they were part of the security team with me. And that let me do so much great work there and build phenomenal relationships because, as you know, too, we are managing this work through influence so much of the time, if not almost all of the time. And so building those relationships and making sure people understand that you're trying to help them achieve their objectives, not just your own, was critical. And yes, maybe I should stop and take a break there, but that's kind of how I went through those pivots. Was at CareOf for a couple of years and then now have been about 2 years. I'll wrap it up with this. 2 years at ANV Cyber, which is cyber insurance. But as you so eloquently mentioned, my role at the insurance company is to help our policyholders not just transfer their risk with an insurance policy, but actually look at their security posture and make some changes. And so I have these great conversations with folks that are not about me trying to, convince them to buy $100,000 SIEM system or anything like that. Not that there's anything wrong with that, that's great, but figure out where they are and what are the next steps they can make, low cost, no cost, thoughtful things that support their business objectives and can help them grow their business. And so that takes a lot of conversation and context too. But anyway, that work is great. Now I'm going to take a little bit more sip of caffeine, though it doesn't sound like I need any.
Well, that's terrific. There's so many good pieces of knowledge that you just dropped through that whole conversation. I hope when people listen to this episode that they stop, they go back and they listen to that first 20 minutes again, because there's so many things that are important that you shared about what you learned along the way that lead people down the path to success. One of those things is confidence, but you didn't just show up at 20 something years old and decide you were going to travel around the world. Let's go back. Tell us, like, what kind of kid were you growing up? What was the influence of your parents? Because as you spoke from your 20s moving on, there's a lot of confidence there that allowed you to establish the experience to build your success in your career. But tell us what that foundation looks like.
Yeah. So I have a twin sister, and identical twin sister, who was also a Backroads leader. She started leading, I think, either 1 or 2 years after I did. And I bring this up because our entire extended family was probably flabbergasted that our career path out of college was adventure travel guide, bike guide. They're like, really? Them? Because we weren't incredibly outdoorsy kids. I mean, we camped with our family and stuff like that. It's not like we were never outside. But we were bookworms, both of us, like straight A student, well, mostly straight A students. Like that was kind of both of our personas. I did some academic competitions in high school, academic decathlon. Actually, that's how I got to be friends with one of my current bosses, right? We were on the academic decathlon team together. So that was a little bit, but I'd actually say two of the biggest things that built up my confidence as a young adult, maybe, were in college doing that study abroad, because I took off for a good solid semester, finally got some distance from my twin who, we fought a lot at the time. We get along great now, but got some distance from my twin who went to the same college as me, got some distance from my family just to be out on my own truly, because I'd gone to college 90 miles away from where I grew up. And it really taught me, if I can handle this in another language that I'm just, barely grasping, I can handle this in English, easy, no problem. That's a no-brainer. So that gave me a big boost of academic or mental confidence. And then also for 3 months after I graduated college, I did a NOLS semester, so the National Outdoor Leadership School. And that I found myself doing that because I had dated a boy that did it and spoke about it. It's always a love interest, right? So I had heard a lot about NOLS from him. I was like, that sounds fun. But again, like before I did NOLS, and I don't know how familiar you are with NOLS, but it's like outward bound, right? Lots of backcountry extended adventures. Before I had done my NOLS semester, I had never gone backpacking. I'd gone camping, but like car camping, right? So not that far away from civilization. And this NOLS semester was 3 months in the backcountry. We came back to the front country periodically to switch out because we did 4 different activities. We did a couple weeks of winter camping in the Absarokas up in Wyoming. We did then just under a month of backpacking down through the north rim of the Grand Canyon. So out for 28 days, backcountry, like 65-pound packs, re-rationed a couple times. We did about 3 weeks or so of rock climbing out in the house range in Utah. And then we did three or 4 weeks or so of rafting on the Dolores in Colorado, and then on the Deso Gray, rafting and whitewater kayaking. So again, this is big adventure. I had been a whitewater raft guide by then, so I'd done a little bit of that. But that first day, I was just recounting this on the backpacking adventure this weekend too. That first day that I woke up sleeping in the snow for the winter portion of that semester, I thought, what hell have I done? What choice have I made? Why did I do this to myself? And that was the only time in that whole semester or a couple, 3 months that I had that kind of thought, because after that, I loved it. I loved every second of it, even the hard parts. And again, right, like it reminded me or taught me I can do hard things. I can put myself in uncomfortable situations and come out the other side, whether that's being laid off or taking a job that I don't feel all the way ready for, or speaking to CEOs that I feel, must be smarter or more talented than me, right? People are all people. So that those two experiences, that study abroad, again, taught me like I can deal with mental challenges, mental academic challenges. And the Knowles course really like I can get through physically hard things. I can, things that are uncomfortable, things that I don't love in the moment, they're finite experiences. I will get through them. And those things set me up in ways that I still draw on now, that I drew on 3 days ago, climbing up a mountain. And that I drew on a lot when I started my career as an adventure guide, because I thought, this is front country stuff. I can do this. I can lead these folks. I can have interesting conversations. I can, get us through challenging situations. But yeah, that confidence, I think this comes from finding your way through hard things.
Yeah, and it sounds like you developed resilience along the way as well, and confidence and resilience. Two very powerful things to have in your pocket as you're moving through life. I enjoyed listening to you talk about waking up in the snow. I've done that as well. And the first time you're like, this is cool. It's cold, it's weird, but it's very cool. And you made me, you helped remind me of a time when I woke up. It was when I was in the Marines. We had been hiking all day long, and we hiked into the evening. And it's physically exhausting. As you know, when you have a 65-pound or heavier pack on your back, you're not just facing the incline and the decline and the terrain that you're walking through, but it's that constant weight that's also on you. And so you get to the end of the day, you sleep usually pretty well. And I remember we sat down. I don't even remember how we got to where we were. It was sort of a clearing in the woods with a lot of rocks. And I passed right out on the rocks, and I woke up the next morning with rain coming down on me, and I was kind of like my limbs all over the different rocks, but it was beautiful in that moment. But also I said, wow, this is something I never thought I could do or would do, but I've done it. Right. So each of those items, as you were telling your story, I could hear you building up the skills that you would need later in life to build that success. Because when you've done these things that a lot of people don't do, or that you don't think you can do, sitting in front of a CEO, sitting in front of a board of directors, it's all just like, I've done harder things than this. I've been in situations where I was in real possible physical danger. And so I can deal with this. So it's very interesting to hear those parts of your story. And I appreciate you taking us way back, because I knew you didn't just show up in your 20s.
Here we go.
Yeah, I'm ready to go. Give me everything. So you talked a lot about you didn't follow the technical route. And I've heard that before. It's interesting because a lot of the people that have studied different languages, have studied coding, have done these activities outside of their regular work, come into information security, and they're very, very capable of taking the technical piece and moving quickly from start into it. And I'm not surprised that someone picked you out of the crowd and said, hey, you had the courses, but you are a whole person, and I can see this whole person. You can communicate well. You have confidence. You have resilience. Let's give this a shot. And that's an important part of your story to highlight for people that are listening, especially people that are newer in their careers or want to do a career pivot, because cybersecurity from the outside can look very daunting.
Yeah.
But as you noticed, when you get in it, it's a lot of communications. It's a lot of influence. It's a lot of having confidence in what you're saying, because we don't own the endpoints. We don't own the servers. We don't own the customers. The only lever we have is trust and confidence to get others to do the work that we need to do. Has there been a time when that skill set that you developed wasn't working so well for you? And if it wasn't working so well for you, how did you work around that?
Yeah. That's an excellent question. Let me think on that. There have been times where I've had to go back and for lack of a better word, I guess, start over a bit with a conversation, right? There have been times where maybe I got too comfortable with thinking everybody was on the same page. But then we diverged in our paths or our understanding. There was a time at a previous role where there was the HR team was really trying to accomplish some objectives. And I'll be quite frank. I was going to say, I'll be honest. I'm always honest. I'll be quite frank. I thought they were focusing on the wrong thing to boost employee morale, but I'm not an HR employee. So, that wasn't my task to decide how to solve that problem. But how they wanted to solve it did then involve me in support of my work and my team's work. And there was a lot of communication via Slack, and we know too, like sometimes Slack does not convey tone. Sometimes, like almost always, does not convey tone, and people can get real spun up very easily because they misread intention or what have you. And I remember being in a conversation where we finally gathered all the players. Myself, another colleague of mine who worked on like enterprise systems, who was still to this day a great friend of mine. Our boss and the HR team to sort of like, hammer it out, like, let's figure out what's happening here and why aren't things getting done. And I just remember feeling so defensive about things they were saying. It was like, I got receipt, like in my head, I was like, I got receipts, that didn't happen, right? And then I started thinking, I was like, that doesn't really accomplish anything. Like, it might make me feel better in a second. Like, nope, I'm right. You were wrong. That's not what happened. And I just had to let that go. I'm like, that's not important. I had to like park my ego and remind myself that my boss knew that I did good work and that I was showing up as myself and trying to support the growth of the business and support of other teams. And I was like, he doesn't need me to come with my receipts. I already know he trusts me. I don't need to do that. That's not where we need to spend our energy. What we need to spend our energy on is making sure that we can all align on how to move forward to solve this problem in a secure way. Right. And I need to maybe give a little, and I need to make sure that they understand where I'm coming from in terms that resonate with them again. So I don't know if that answered your original question, but I do remember just like, okay, I got to park the ego and park the whole receipts conversation because it's not serving our purpose here.
Yeah. So that's a good segue into my next question. You wrote for Security Magazine about building a security first culture. And your first tip was to lead with curiosity, not threat intel, not policy, not tools. You obviously live a life of curiosity. How do you instill that in others? And what is the payback that you see when you build that security first culture?
Yeah, I think, we always hear people love to speak about themselves. And here I've been speaking about myself for 40 minutes now. People love to speak about themselves and their goals and their interests, and they like to feel listened to. So building a security first culture, like I said, starts with curiosity. It starts with asking questions like you are so good at. And so what I've done is encourage both my, folks that have been on my team that I've led and my peers, et cetera, to start with those questions. Don't start with your objectives. Start with understanding a little bit more about the other person, right? As a backgrowth guide, as a venture travel guide, I remember when we would do these hiring events there and understanding that the leaders they were looking for were not the leaders that were the strongest bikers or the most incredible bike mechanics or things like that. Those were all technical skills that can be taught, or physical skills that can be mastered. What they were looking for they would say, it's like, I just want to find someone that I could sit down and have a beer with for 3 hours. Like who's the person that I can have a good conversation with? Because that was so much of the job, right? We were riding along the roads and having a chat with someone who could be, again, like a CEO for Otter Pops or an undertaker. I had both of these people on trips. And finding conversation with them and finding ways to connect with them. And that is the same, right? So I would look to hire people that I could get along personally with too. Like, it doesn't mean we're going to be besties or anything. I had a gentleman on my team one time who, all of our one-on-ones were very direct. Like, he just wanted to jump into what he was working on. Great. That's how he wanted to connect. I had another, we would shoot the shit for like 20 minutes of our 30-minute one-on-one about like what was going on with our personal lives. And that's how he wanted to connect. And if he wanted to bring up personal stuff, work stuff, then we would get to that too. But we connected as people first. And so building that security culture, back to your original question, I think was finding how people wanted to interact. Did they want to share more of their personal stuff in life? Some people do, some people don't. There's no wrong way there. But connecting with people first, making them feel comfortable. At CareOf, for example, I always made sure that I connected with the new employees within the first couple of days of them starting, so they had a face to the security person, and reminded them, it's like, I'm never going to be upset at anyone or feel any kind of way about somebody reaching out to me with a question or a concern because they think they clicked on something. Don't worry about that at all. Come to me 20 times a day with questions. Just know I'm here for you. And making that connection first made sure that they felt comfortable with me, made sure that they became an ambassador for reaching out to the security team and involving us in conversations, in projects, in program management and sprint kickoffs, et cetera. So that was a big part of how to build the security or the culture. And then again, encouraging the folks on my team to do the same. In my work now, I make it really clear when I talk to policyholders, for example, or at least I attempt to make it clear, I'm not an underwriter. Your policy is already baked. I'm not trying to pull over rocks and figure out if there was anything you said in your application that's different than what you're sharing with me. I mean, I work with the underwriters, of course, but that's not what this is. This is just me seeing how I can help you. We're having a friendly conversation. This is for me to ask you questions so I learn more about your environment, for you to ask me questions so I can give you my perspective. But I understand too, the business has objectives, and if security doesn't serve those objectives, then we have no role in this conversation. Does not exist in a vacuum. So I want to understand what your concerns are first. What's keeping you up night? That could be a security concern. That could be a revenue concern. But let's lead with that. Where is your brain space at? And then I'll connect with you there.
Yeah, and that is a super hard change of mind to influence on someone, whether it's people on your team or it's, in your case, the customers that you're trying to support. Do you find, and this may have changed over the last 5 or 6 years, or maybe the last 10 years, do you find that there's still a lot of security professionals showing up at the table that are saying, no, it has to be done this way, this is the way I learned, and there can be no exceptions? Or is that cultural shift occurring now across information security, in your opinion, where leaders are showing up now saying, oh no, I'm here to support the business, and I need help finding these gray areas that I operate in and that are acceptable to you as an insurer of our company? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a shift towards a lot. There's still pockets of the former, and I've experienced that too. At CareOf, at my former company, I would say we were in the healthcare adjacent space. So I interfaced with a lot of healthcare, facilities when they would vet us as a potential vendor, and just looking at these questions. And it could be, one that stands out is always, are you enforcing password changes, every 30 days or whatever? And I always want to say, per NIST guidelines now, we're not adhering to that. That's old guidance, right? So I saw a lot of that there in the healthcare space. And I think at the time, healthcare was still sort of old school. And I'm not pointing fingers. They have a lot of concerns to deal with. That's a hard industry to do security in. So I've seen pieces like that. And then I've seen now when I shift into this, I think because I frame it as a very friendly and helpful conversation, people are really open to learning, what are you seeing out there? What is industry best practice now? This is what we've been doing. This is what I've been taught, but I'm open to learning something different or understanding that there's nothing static in security. It's all so dynamic, and the guidance and best practices are changing, if not not daily, maybe by the minute these days, I swear. So I'm seeing a lot of folks being very open to change. And with that, inevitably we have to touch on AI, right? Because can you have a conversation about security without talking about AI anymore? They'll want to know, well, what should we be doing about AI? And that's a great example. Is well, I can't answer that for you right now until we talk a little bit more about what are you doing with it now? What's the comfort level of your team with AI? Are they, we work with insurers that have, tens of thousands of employees. They're global hospitality enterprises, all the way down to, maybe like a single practitioner healthcare provider, right? So what's the context of your business? How might you use it? Let's just start with, do you understand how, the whole idea of, if you're not paying for a product, you are the product, right? So if you're using those free tools, just know they're using, what you feed in there. That might be okay with how you use it. Everyone's risk profile is different. So to your original question, I think I'm seeing a lot of folks that I interface with in this role has been very open to the conversation and changing guidance. And hey, we're thinking about this. What should we be paying attention to, or what questions should we be asking? And I think that's I think what questions should we be asking, or what considerations should we have, is a great place to start for all of us.
Yeah, it's nice to see the change in the insurance industry, because 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was kind of a not a good relationship. I remember answering questionnaires and then having the interview, and was very worried about how I answered, because we desperately needed to have the cybersecurity insurance. Now it is much more a collaboration. And it's interesting, because if you have tools internally to evaluate your gaps, and you meet with that cybersecurity professional from the insurance company, and they ask you the same questions, and you're having that genuine open conversation, usually what you find is you come to the same amount of cybersecurity insurance. There might be a few recommendations on things you can do better, but it's a good thing for both parties, because if we're working together at the table, the cost for the insurers goes down and the cost for the insured goes down. So keeping that open mind is critical. And you made a great point. If you are in information security today and you are not able to adapt quickly, and you are relying on what you know from 5-10 years ago, or even from 2 years ago, you're going to have a hard time in this business. And it's something I have to coach some of my younger staff on all the time, because they're still holding on to that. Well, you have to do it this way. Well, no, what you learned a year ago doesn't necessarily hold. Don't stick to that. And also, we're not the business. We are supporting the business. So,
That's right.
You touched on all these pieces, right? Critical for people to know this, and critical for people coming into cybersecurity or operating in cybersecurity now. What you know today is what you know today. Be open to what's going to change tomorrow. And also know yourself well enough that if you find that you can't change anymore, or you're not willing to change anymore, it might be time for you to pivot out of the industry, because that's not going away. This is a new world we're working in. And you've talked a lot about that. I have to think, for the industry that you're supporting, even, it's a lot for you to keep up with, because you've got all these new variables that are factoring into coverage and what might be in, possible payouts.
Yeah. It's there's a lot, right? We know it's a full-time job to just stay abreast of the news, and what's Scattered Spider up to this week, and what are the latest tactics. And I get different questions all the time, and from my guiding days too, like I said, pre-smartphone, I think you also have to be afraid to say, I don't know, or more specifically, I don't know that yet. I will get back to you. One of my former bosses, I think, was the best model of that. It's like, walk me through that. I don't quite understand that. Or again, when people, I'll be on conversations with folks, and they'll say, this is my situation. Do you think it's better to do this or that? And I'm not going to hesitate to pull up a quick, search and look at a few articles, or say, let me look into that a little bit. I'm going to shoot you an email or give you a call tomorrow. This is what I think right now, but I want to dig in a bit, because I haven't revisited that topic in a couple of weeks or what have you. So being unafraid to say, I don't know that yet, or let me look into that a little bit more and get back to you. That's fine. We're all human. We can't all possibly know all the things all the time, right? And in security, it's become, I'm not comparing myself or ourselves to healthcare professionals, but I think about this analogy a lot. And it's like, you could go to a podiatrist and ask them something about, I don't know, your skin freckle or whatever. And they're a knowledgeable medical professional, but that's not their specialty, right? So it's kind of like that in security. It's like, we all have our niches, and we might be stronger here or there. And, I can talk about privacy, but I'm not a privacy expert, but I can dig in and help connect you to people that are more well-versed than me, or I can give you some some good 30,000, maybe you bring it down to 10,000 foot view on topics, but knowing a broad, like an inch deep, mile wide is good, but it's hard to go it's hard to go mile wide and mile deep on everything, if not impossible, right? And that's, I think, something that people outside of cybersecurity don't always know, that there are so many different areas that we could all specialize in or know. So I bring that back to Sam. Like, I'm not afraid to say that's not my particular specialty, but I can get you to some resources that can help you with that.
Yeah, that is so accurate. I find myself more often now saying I don't know, only because let's take Mythos, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're what, 7 weeks out, I think, from that. Well, I gave a briefing right when it came out, and then another 2 weeks later, and I was just asked a couple of days ago for an update, and I had to say, I don't know, because I haven't had a chance to go back, and it is, the talk in the industry is changing every single day. It's a good conversation that's happening, but it's evolving so quickly alongside Mythos and Glasswing that I think it would be foolish for us to say on any given day that we know exactly what the status of that one particular item is,
right?
Let alone everything else. And it is a constant running to keep up with the information. I don't know about you, but I'm using Claude to prepare a daily briefing for me. So first thing in the morning when I get up with my caffeine, I'm saying, what happened overnight that I don't know about? What has been the evolution in 24 hours? Because we're living in a world now where these changes are that fast. And I think you're probably doing this. I know I'm doing this. I'm coaching executives. We have to move fast. That's all I can tell you right now.
Yeah.
We have to do the fundamentals quicker than we used to do them.
Yes.
We have to keep learning as fast as we can, because the threat actors who are using these tools and backward engineering everything that Anthropic did, they're already activating these tools and using them and preparing to try and exploit them.
Yep.
The overall game hasn't changed.
Right. I was glad you said that. I was just going to say the fundamentals are the same, though. Things are just moving really fast.
Yeah. And the AI tools, security tools that are coming out, aren't going to replace those good practices or those basic tools like endpoint security, firewalls that you have to have in place.
Right.
So you've got an existing investment, and you've got new investments that are coming, because you are going to have to use AI enhanced tools. You've talked a lot about tools and said, don't just go get tools because that's the tool you're supposed to get. Get the tool that's right for the functions of your business. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I love the work. In the work that I do, what I love is being able to actually talk to the policyholders, because we get these applications, and I don't know about you, but a lot of I have to believe that a lot of the applications are filled out by, the controller or the CFO or someone that's not necessarily on the security team. I'm not pointing fingers. That's just how the paperwork gets through, because that person is in charge of securing insurance. And I'm sure they check in with the security team and whatnot. But from being on the other side and looking at those applications, I remember feeling so limited in how I could respond, because there's so many nuanced answers to that. Like, do you have MFA? Well, yes, on many things, but this one tool we don't have the option. So no, we don't. So do I put yes or no? Because it's not 100% yes, but if I put no, that's not accurate either. So the conversations that I get to have, we get to get into that nuance. And I've been asked, well, isn't there just some tool that can make their security posture better? I'm like, that's not exactly how, actually, it's not even, that's not how it works. It's puzzle pieces, it's people, process, technology. But for me, the biggest thing is the people. And I know that might seem trite, and I do a lot of security awareness education for end users too. And I don't just mean that to say that we've got to educate our users to not click on things. Yes, of course, that's important. But I think the important piece is just understanding what is the culture of the security there. And I keep coming back to that, because I've told underwriters that, when for example, I've had policyholders who's like, oh yeah, we'll have that conversation, but we're just going to have our managed IT team talk to you about it. Okay, that's fine. But I would love to also speak to somebody at the organization, where I'd be like, Acme Bread, and they work with, Bob's IT consulting or whatever. Like, it's great. I'm happy to talk to Bob's IT Consulting about how they support your IT and security stack. But the fact that, or the idea that nobody at Acme Bread wants to be a part of this conversation, that gives me a bigger concern than any list of controls they have or don't have, right? Like they need to be an active participant in it, even if that's just to hear the concerns or whatever. So to your question on tools, it's not just about the tools, right? We talk to people about getting, one of the things we do is we'll talk to our policyholders about their Google Workspace profile or their M365 profile, and we'll do like sort of a shoulder surfing session with them to make sure they're getting the most bang for their buck about whatever license level they have, and that they're using all the security features and tools. And so that's an example of like, hey, we're not trying to get you to spend any more money on anything. We're just trying to help you use the tool to its most, its best advantage. And where the people come in, it's like they want to do that work. They want to spend an hour and a half or so with us to learn how to shore that up or to manage that going forward. So it's not about the tool. We'll talk to folks that maybe they're post-incident and they're like, what could we do better? I'm like, well, having this conversation is the great first step, right? A debrief after an incident, whether that's a tabletop or a real incident. What happened? How can we make sure this doesn't happen going forward? The fact that you want to have that conversation and not just point fingers, that's a great step. But it's not all about like throwing all the tools at it, because you could have 45 different tools and 45 different owners of those tools. That's not going to make you more secure. What is the holistic strategy around how to plug in those tools or those processes or those people and make sure that they're all communicating and working together, and not just, throwing money at the problem? Because it's great if you're throwing money at security. As practitioners, we love that, right? We always want more budget, but there's got to be that full life cycle buy-in and management of the tools too, or they're just going to, be wasted money.
Yeah. And that's the worst thing, is to be in charge of security and be wasting the money, because you have to answer to someone, usually the CFO, a couple times a year as to how you're using the company's money.
Right.
And if you're not showing a risk reduction, you're in a lot of trouble. You've talked a lot about workforce development. I think you're involved with WESIS as well. Across our industry lately, there's been a lot of conversation about, is there a workforce shortage? I want to ask you the question in a different way. If there's not a workforce shortage, if I can get it out, is there some other problem? Is it a diversity problem or an acceptance problem? Because you've talked about coming in the industry from not a traditional path. Talk a little bit about your opinions around that.
That has been part of the zeitgeist conversation since I got into this field, for sure, that there's a person shortage. I do think it's a little bit of all of those things. I think we're still a little bit early in the evolution of thought around who is qualified to hold these roles, right? So I love assert as much as the next person. I love that external validation of, letters. So I'm not saying anyone should or should not pursue certifications. But I think that, again, when people think that security is solved by throwing money or tools or somebody with a fancy certification at the problem, that they're not going to get the results that they're hoping for. And so when we see job descriptions that are like, oh, we want, I know everybody's talked about this, like they want some sort of entry-level role that has a CISSP, then there's a disconnect there in what is actually required of that role. I think the more folks that we get that have backgrounds that are diverse like ours, I think when we are in these hiring roles, we can appreciate that. I had the opportunity to promote and hire folks that didn't have a traditional IT background. And because, like my bias, I was like, I'm sure they can do it because I've seen their talents in other places, right? But if you've got someone who's been maybe a more linear pathway or feels the pressure maybe from their bosses or their organization to go a bit with a more traditional hire, then yeah, I think that's going to be really challenging, especially as we are getting into the zone where, folks, I have a kid that's about to go to college, and they're not considering computer science in particular, but we're seeing a lot of these articles saying like kids don't major in computer science. That's not the golden ticket anymore. We're going to see more folks drop off that, and we're going to see different educational pathways. because of artificial intelligence, people are trying to figure out what is the AI proof job that I can go into or course of study. And I think that when people, there's that sunk cost, right? That when people have gone all in on a particular course of study or particular, I still meet folks that are like, well, no, this has been my career forever. I don't want to start over. And if I can lead anyone, if people are still listening, if I can lead anyone with any piece of advice, my advice is to go out and read the book Range by David Epstein. Have you read that? It's really good.
Not.
It's Range. The subtitle is Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. And it's such an interesting read. He talks about like all different case studies, but he goes, he kind of goes antithesis to Malcolm Gladwell's like 10,000 hours theorem. That like, yep, that's good. And that's really beneficial for things like chess or, you know, some sort of disciplines. But in many other cases, the human brain is so much more better equipped to make creative choices and make creative solutions when you are a generalist, right? Because you draw from all your different experiences, like we've been talking about, to solve these problems. So I don't think that there is a person short. We've got tons of people looking for work right now, right? And we've got lots of companies that are thinking that AI is going to solve all their problems and you know, reshape their workforce. But I think there's going to still continue to be that need for people that are generalists that can pull inspiration and context from so many different disciplines and fields of study and experiences. And I think that evolution of thought is what we're still waiting to catch up.
Love that. You snuck in a little call for action there at the end. I didn't have to ask you for one. Perfect. As we're closing up, where can people find you or connect with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find. Courtney Hans at ANV Cyber. Yeah, would love to connect with folks on LinkedIn. Periodically, I'll hit the conference circuit and give a talk, and I love to chat with folks after that. I don't have anything on my calendar right now for giving a talk, but I love to meet people at conferences in the Seattle area, B-Side, Secure World. And yeah, but LinkedIn's a great one.
Courtney, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. People, reach out to Courtney, go and listen. She's been on multiple podcasts. Listen to this one first, and listen to it a couple times and like it and subscribe to it, but then go out and listen to the other talks that Courtney has given, because they're really good. And there's a lot of information Courtney has to share with you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, yes.
For our listeners, thank you for listening today. If this conversation resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Voices of the Vigilant. If you liked what you heard today, please subscribe and leave a review in your favorite podcast app. For a copy of the transcript, to follow Jess, to apply as a guest of the show, or to learn more about services from Vigilant Violet, please visit vigilantviolet.com. Until next time, stay vigilant.